Now that we have learned about one-dimensional arrays and how you can take several multiple arrays and you can create commonality between them just based upon the values in their at the individual indexes, we're going to talk about two-dimensional arrays. So we're going to write a program. This one is practicing a two-dimensional array with a hotel. And so a hotel is going to have floors, and on each floor there is going to be a number of rooms. So what we're going to do is we're going to ask the user what floor and what room number they would like to be assigned to. And then if that room, that element of the two-dimensional array is available, then we're going to assign them to that room. That just means that we're going to put their name in there. So I've started a little bit of pseudocode here. I have actually included a couple of libraries where the IOStream, the string and the IO manipulation, because we are going to set the width so that we can have some formatting. And when we output or display our two-dimensional array, we're going to actually create some global constants for the room number and the floor number. And then this is the pseudocode that we're going to do for our main program. We're going to create some variables. We're going to initialize our array. We'll set all of the elements to available or avail, A-V-A-I-L, so that when we check to see if the desired room and floor number is not avail, or if it is avail, we're just going to put their name in there. So then we'll display it. We're going to ask the user for their name because that's what we're going to use to register them into a particular room. And then we're going to loop through. Give me a room and a floor number. Then we're going to make sure that that room and the floor number is valid. If it is valid, we're going to assign them a room. We're going to display it again, and we're going to say, hey, do you want to net register for another room? So this is the program that we're going to write. So I'm going to start at the very top on line 14 and 15, and we're going to declare these global constants. They're global, they're constants because we use the keyword constant, and they're global because I'm going to put them above or outside of main. So we're going to create a hotel that has 3 floors and 6 rooms on each floor. And then we'll go on and we'll create some more variables inside of main. All right, so on line 21, we have created a string two-dimensional array called sleep well. And then I've hard-coded the 2 constants for the floors and the rooms on each floor. This is the rows and the columns. And then I've declared some variables, a string variable for name, because I'm going to prompt them for their name. And then I've created a couple event variables for what room and floor do you want to be in. And then the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to initialize the array so that each one of the elements contains the word avail. And I can tell that my int variables on line 27 are not necessarily happy because currently they are uninitialized. So if I were to initialize them to 0, then they should be happy. All right, so to initialize the array, so with a single dimensional array, we've already seen the way to loop through a single dimensional array is a single for loop or perhaps even a single while loop. But now I have a two-dimensional array, which means that I am going to need nested for loops. So the outer for loop is going to control what row I am currently on. And then the inner for loop is going to control what I am doing when I am sitting on a very specific row. So let me write the outer for loop. To try to make more sense, my loop control variable instead of count or I or j or k or whatever you normally like to use for a loop control variable, I'm going to actually use the name for my loop control variable for the outer for loop as row, because we're going to start on row 0, then row 1, then row 2, and row 3. So I'm going to put end outer for here. And then we're going to repeat the process for an inner loop, because when I'm sitting on row 0, what do I want to do? So let's create an inner for loop. My loop control variable here, I'm going to call, I'll call it columns. So if you'll notice, as long as my rows is less than floor, we hard-coded that constant variable. All right, so now I have my inner for. The loop control variable is going to be columns, and as long as columns is less than the number of rooms, because on each floor there are 6 rooms. And so what do I want to do when I am on a single floor of my hotel as I'm moving through each one of the rooms? We have already decided that what I would like to do is to set that value equal to the word avail. And so The name of my array is sleep well. The first one is going to be row. The second is going to be column. And we're going to set it equal to a string available. And this way I'm going to be able to check to see if that particular row and column pair is equal to avail. That's how I'll determine if it is available to be assigned. So let me kind of pull these in together. And then let's display the array, and then we'll run the program and see what it looks like when we display the array. So the display of the array is going to be much the same. We're going to have an outer loop that is controlling the floor that we are on, and then the inner loop is going to control what we're going to do when we're sitting on a specific floor or row. So we already learned that we can do a shortcut, which means if there's a single line of code that follows, we learned it for an if statement and a for statement, that I don't actually need the braces, the curly braces, to indicate the grouping. And so we're going to see that for this outer for loop, it is going to execute a single line of code following it. It just happens to be a for structure. And so my inner for loop, this inner for loop, all I want to do is see out each one of the elements. We are going to actually set the width of each one of them so that we'll set the width of each one of the fields to, how about if we set it to 15? And then that's why that set width is the reason why I included IO manipulation, because we're kind of format this a little bit. And then we will do our with row, and then column, and then so this is our outer loop and our inner loop. When I run it, I can see that it is actually with no forced new lines. It's just kind of stringing it out into one long line, and the reason why it is wrapping is because of the size of the window that it's displaying in. So how about if we add an end line in here? Now, I don't want to add the end line when I am on a single row. I want to add the end line once I have moved off of that particular row. So I'm going to have to add, a couple of braces here. This is the inner for, and once I'm done with that inner for, I would like to see out an end line, which means that now I am going to need my curly braces. Now that is one of the problems with this shortcut where you're not using the curly braces. This is the outer for right there. Is the fact that if I come back and I add a couple of more lines or even one more instruction, and if I don't have those braces, then it is not inside of that looping structure anymore. So if I run it now, let's see if we get a nice format. All right, I can see that now I have 3 rows, aka 3 floors. I can see on each one of the rows there are 6 columns. I can see that they are nicely formatted to 15 in width, and I can also see that they are all initialized to avail. And you see down here that this is my graceful close at the end. If I scroll all the way down, once we were done with our looping structure, then we had our graceful close. So the next thing that we wanted to do was we're going to prompt for the name. And then we're going to enter a loop so that I can prompt for a floor number and a room number. So for my guest registration, I'm going to do my friendly greeting. I'm going to force a new line to ask them for their name. And I'm also going to give them the sentinel value because I'm about to put them into a loop. So I'm going to give them a sentinel value to be able to get out. Otherwise, they're going to get trapped in there. So the kind of loop that we were going to use is a while loop. And so the condition on the while loop is going to be while name is not equal to our sentinel value, which was a Q to quit. So as long as it is not, oh my goodness, as long as it's not a Q to quit, look, it's trying to help me. I'm going to put my opening curly brace here. This says this is the end of my loop on line, for me it's line 68. So I'm just going to come down here and put the closing curly brace. Everything else is going to be tabbed in to indicate the fact that we are inside of a looping structure. And if I want to test this, the last thing that I should do inside of here is we should probably prompt them again. And the way that we're going to prompt them again is this prompt right here. We're going to ask them to enter their name. So for the sake of time, I'm just going to paste that in here. But instead of saying welcome to sleep well, I'm just going to tell them to please enter your name. That is going to be the change of my condition. And then we do have to CN. I noticed that we didn't CN here. So we're going to CN name. We're probably going to have to do that up here. Well, we definitely will. CN name. And there's one more thing that we're going to do after we have read in the name right here, Q to quit. This says Q to quit because we want to take into consideration that they may have keyed in an uppercase letter. And if my condition is going to be looking for a lowercase q, I should probably force that value to a lowercase q. So for the sake of time, another option that we have is if our input, if name is equal to a lowercase q or name not equal to, and then we'll do a capital Q. And then if it would be name equal to Q, a lowercase q or an uppercase Q, that not is going to change this to an and symbol. All right, so let's run it and see what we get. So if I am testing it, let's see if I put in James, if I put in Juan, but I put in Susan, and then Q to quit. So it looks like my looping structure is working well, but what happens if I put in Tiny Tim? What do you expect to have happen if I put in a Tiny Tim? It looks like it ignored my second read. Do you remember why? Let me close that down, and it has to do with the fact that that is a CN. We should probably be using the get line. And the two parameters that go in the get line is the input stream and the variable that I want to put that in. So this is going to allow us to get multiple words because some people have multiple names, which means that I am going to change the second read here. We'll change that second read right here also to a get line. So now I could have put in a first name like Sammy, and it will move on. And I can put in Tiny Tim, and it will ask me again until I key in my sentinel value. All right, so from here, there's just a few more things that we're going to do. We're going to prompt them for the floor and the room number. So I'm going to prompt them on line 56, right inside the while loop for the desired floor. I'll read it in. I'm going to prompt them for the desired room on that floor, and then we'll read that in. That would be room. In the part of that prompt, I'm going to mirror back on the desired floor, just to kind of mirror back some information. And let's run it, see how it's working so far. It's always a good idea to run your program often, early and often, so that you can see how it's working. So if I say Sam, enter to the desired floor, they say 12, the desired room on floor 12, and if I say 15, now it says enter your name. Notice that it didn't wait for me to enter a name, it just says enter the desired floor. It didn't wait for me to enter that. Why wouldn't it wait for me to enter that? And it's probably because after these CN reads, that get line is reading everything up to and including the enter key, which means there's already an enter key in there. So in order to stop that from happening, we're going to have to clear the input stream. So I'm going to add a line of code down here at the change of my condition at the bottom of the loop. Then we're just going to do a CN ignore. And we're going to clear the input stream. I'm going to use the int max, capitalized int max, or until the enter key is encountered, either one of those. And when I run it now, let's just test it to make sure that we are actually getting those reads correct. So if I say Sam, desired floor, I'm just going to put some values here, and it seems like it. Wait, we'll say Dean. We'll put some more floors here, and then Q to quit. So the next thing that we need to do is we need to validate the selection. Now, I have not forced any kind of valid input on their floor and their room number. It would be a really good idea to expand this program to say, we only have 3 floors, you can't request floor 12. We only have 6 rooms on a floor, you can't request room 23. But for the sake of time in this program, we're going to validate that selection here on line 64. So I'm going to put a while loop to validate the floors and rooms because I don't want to try to check my two-dimensional array with invalid indexes for the rooms and the floors. So I'm just going to put it in a while loop that says while their desired floor is greater than or equal to floor, or the desired room is greater than or equal to rooms. I'm going to tell it it's invalid input to try again, and then I'm going to do a break to break out of this while loop. Now the break statement will break out of this while, but it will not break out of the outer while. Since it breaks out of the inner while on line 64, but not the outer while, that means it's just going to continue marching down the code. So if it marches down the code, all of a sudden it's going to try to assign the room because that's the next thing that we want to do. So how about if we kind of hold them here and force a valid input? So I'm going to prompt him again. I told him it was invalid. I'm going to prompt him again for the floor and the room number. So I'm just going to copy the prompt for the floor and the room number again. I'm going to remove the break because I don't want to break out of the while loop. I want to stay in the while loop as long as they're giving me invalid floor and room numbers. So let's see if it's holding them there. So an invalid floor number, an invalid room number, try it again. So then I'll put a valid floor number and an invalid room number. It's still holding me there. And then we'll try them both as valid and then Q to quit. So now that I know I have a good floor and room number, I am going to check the value at that floor and room in our array and to see if that valid is, or that value in that particular cell is available. If it's not available, I'm going to tell them it's not available. If it is, I'm going to replace avail with their name. So my if statement is going to be, when I'm trying to assign the room, if the room is not available, I'm going to tell them it's not available. Please try again. And then the very next thing, we're going to display the array so they can see it, and we're going to ask them for another name on the change of the condition. But I want you to notice that when I am indexing my array, it's floor -1 and room -1. Because I'm not going to ask the user to key in. There are 3 floors. You want floor 0, right? My user is generally not going to key in 0. And so I'm going to have to offset their input by the fact that arrays are 0 indexed. So when they say floor 1, it's actually row 0 in my array. So I can do the else, and the else on this one is going to be, we're just going to assign them that room number, which means that all I'm going to do is set that element to their name. Now, because the if statement only has 1 line of code, I can actually remove the braces surrounding it. The else only has 1 line of code. And then we're going to display the array. I'm going to go back up to the top where we already displayed the arrays, and I'm just going to copy and paste it here. So there is the original display of the array, that nested for loop that allows me to control which row I'm on and then what happens while I'm sitting on that row. Let me come down here and paste it right under that. And then we will run it and see how it's working. So let's test it. We'll put Sam in floor 1, room 1, and I see that Sam's name is up there in the top. Let's put Tiny Tim in floor 2, row 2. There is Tiny Tim. Let's see if we can put Juan in floor 3, row 3. Excuse me, floor 3, room 3. It tells me invalid input. Please try again. If I put him in row 3, floor 1, I should be able to put him in row 5 or 6. Let's put him in 3 and 6. That should put him over here in the corner. It tells me again, invalid input. Please try again. Can you tell why this is happening? If we come back here and it says while floor is greater than equal to 4, this was on my line 64, greater than or equal to floors, we want it to be able to equal floors. So if they say I want it to be on floor 3, I want to accept floor 3. So it needs to be greater than 3. And the same thing is true of rows. So when I run it this time, and we try to put Sam in floor 3, row 3, or room 3, it's going to put him in 3-3. And if I try to put Juan in row 3, room 6, it's going to put him all the way here at 1-6. Let's see if we can put Tiny Tim in the same place that Juan is currently in. So we want him on floor 3 and room 6. It should tell me that room is not available because there is already somebody there. Let's put him somewhere else. Tiny Tim, let's put him in 1-6. Oops, and we spelled that one wrong. Anyway, so we have a functioning two-dimensional program.